I've never been one to spook easily. Growing up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, I always felt safe, even when I was home alone. But that all changed one Friday night. I was house-sitting for my parents while they were out of town. It was late, past midnight, and I was curled up on the couch watching a movie. The house was dark, save for the glow from the TV. Outside, the wind howled, rustling the leaves of the trees that lined our backyard. About halfway through the movie, I heard a faint knock at the front door. At first, I thought it might be the wind, but when the knock came again, louder this time, I knew someone was there. My heart started to race. Who would be knocking at this hour? I paused the movie and sat there, in silence, listening. Another knock, more insistent. I stood up slowly, unsure of what to do. We don't usually get visitors, especially not at this time of night. I considered ignoring it, but something compelled me to approach the door. I tiptoed to the front door and peered through the peephole. There was no one there. I waited, heart pounding, expecting the knock to come again, but everything was quiet. I started to convince myself it was just my imagination, or maybe some kids playing a prank. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. From the back of the house, near the kitchen door, I heard a soft scratching sound, like someone was trying to pick the lock. I froze, listening intently. The sound was faint but unmistakable. I crept to the kitchen, moving as quietly as possible. The house was so still that every creak of the floorboards seemed deafening. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped just out of view of the door and listened. The scratching had stopped, but now I could hear faint, muffled voices outside. My first instinct was to call the police, but my phone was in the living room. I cursed under my breath for not bringing it with me. There was no way I was going to risk going back for it now. I had to think fast. Our kitchen had a sliding glass door that led to the backyard, and I knew that if someone got in, it would be through there. I grabbed a large kitchen knife and positioned myself behind the kitchen island, facing the sliding door. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it outside. Then suddenly the handle of the sliding door jiggled. I could see the silhouette of a person outside trying to force it open. I held my breath, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. The door didn't budge, and after what felt like an eternity, the figure moved away. I stayed crouched behind the island, barely daring to breathe. I heard footsteps on the patio, and then the faint sound of retreating voices. After a few minutes, silence returned, but I didn't move. I stayed there, crouched and trembling, until the first light of dawn crept through the windows. When I finally worked up the courage to go outside, I found deep scratches on the sliding door and the front door's lock tampered with. Whoever it was had tried to get in, but thankfully hadn't succeeded. I called the police and they came to investigate, but there was little they could do. To this day, I don't know who was outside my house that night or what they intended to do if they got in. All I know is that I've never felt safe in that house since, especially when I'm home alone. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. My roommates had all gone home, leaving me with the apartment to myself. I was looking forward to the solitude, a break from the constant noise of living with 3 other people. Saturday night, after a long day of doing nothing, I decided to treat myself to a hot shower before bed. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that you only notice when you're truly alone. I was halfway through rinsing the shampoo out of my hair when the light suddenly went out. I cursed under my breath and reached for my phone on the sink counter. I could still hear the water running, but the darkness was total. I fumbled around for my phone, knocking over a bottle in the process. When I finally found it, I turned on the flashlight and illuminated the small bathroom. The power outages weren't uncommon in our area, especially during storms. But tonight, there hadn't been any bad weather. I quickly finished my shower, got dressed, and stepped out into the hallway, phone in hand. The whole apartment was pitch black. I checked my phone. No missed calls or messages. I figured it was a neighborhood outage and that the power would be back soon, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried calling the power company's outage line, but it was busy. Frustrated, I decided to wait it out in the living room. I sat on the couch with my phone's flashlight pointed at the ceiling, casting a dim glow across the room. The apartment felt different in the dark, like something unseen was lurking just out of sight. The silence was unnerving, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. About 10 minutes later, I heard a noise from the kitchen. A soft rustling, like someone shifting through the cupboards. I froze, my heart racing. I knew for a fact that I was alone. My roommates wouldn't be back until Sunday night. I strained my ears, trying to convince myself that I was hearing things, but the rustling came again. This time louder. I got up slowly, gripping my phone tightly as I approached the kitchen. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I rounded the corner, I saw that the kitchen door, which led to the small balcony, was slightly ajar. I could have sworn it was closed earlier. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. Should I make a run for it? Call someone? But before I could decide, I saw a figure move in the darkness, just outside the door. I gasped and stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. Whoever it was must have heard me because the door creaked open wider, and I saw the silhouette of a man stepping into the kitchen. Panic overtook me. I bolted back to my room and locked the door behind me. I could hear footsteps now, heavy and deliberate, moving through the apartment. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911, whispering frantically to the dispatcher. The operator told me to stay on the line and remain quiet. I could hear the man moving around outside my door, and I prayed he wouldn't try to break it down. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, I heard the distant sound of sirens. The footsteps paused, and then, as if in a rush, they moved towards the balcony. I heard the door swing open and slam shut, and then silence. The police arrived minutes later, but by the time they searched the apartment, the intruder was gone. They found signs of forced entry on the balcony door, and a few of our things had been rummaged through, but nothing was stolen. The police told me it was likely a burglar who thought the apartment was empty. I moved out shortly after that. I couldn't bear the thought of being alone in that apartment again, especially at night. Every time the power flickers now, I'm reminded of that night and how close I came to something far worse.